What's up, people? Welcome to another episode of Who Gives a Dram. I am here today, which is Thursday, June 8th. Don't really release podcasts on Thursdays, but you gotta work with what you got. And that's what I'm doing this week. Thank you for tuning in. It's been a few weeks since I've hopped on the podcast here and chatted with you guys. But definitely hasn't been an uneventful few weeks. I've been real busy with things both in and out of whiskey. Lots of whiskey things going on behind the scenes that I wish I could talk about, but I can't talk about yet. Lots of things going on outside of whiskey, a lot of family stuff, good things. Lots of work is busy, lifting a lot, just trying to live life and navigate this world as a single 26-year-old, It's hot in here. That's why I'm wearing my tank top. I don't mean to be exposing so much flesh, but it's hot, and I don't want to be sweaty as I sit here and talk and drink whiskey. And that's what we're going to do today. We haven't done a actual whiskey review in about a month, maybe even longer. It's been a while. Let's see, the last whiskey review we did was Larceny Barrel Proof B522, all the way back on April 19th. So it's almost been 2 months since we actually done a legit whiskey review, and I knew I had some free time tonight, and I planned to record tonight. I didn't know what I was gonna record though. I didn't know if I was gonna talk about maybe finished bourbons and the concept behind that. Maybe sip on a few of my favorite finished bourbons that I have. I didn't know if I was going to talk about what whiskeys I'm going to drink this summer. I didn't know if I was maybe going to do a versus. I just didn't know. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was going through my whiskey, and I noticed that I had this unopened bottle, and I thought this would be the perfect bottle to drink today because it's something that I've never drank before on the podcast. In two ways, this is something that I've never drinking on the podcast. Today we're going to be tasting and reviewing a single barrel selection that I purchased probably a month ago from Starlight Distillery. It is a single barrel bourbon whiskey finished in honey barrels. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see that right on the camera there. I've never done a honey finished bourbon, and I've also never done Starlight on the podcast. So we'll talk a little bit about Starlight. We'll read their About Us page on the old interweb there on their website, and we'll dive into that. And I'm excited to I tasted this before I bought it, and I remember liking it, but I don't really remember. I had a few pours that day at the old liquor store, and I tried to support my friend where I bought this from, Ron at Wyoming Package, and I tried to support him in every single barrel he does, if I can financially afford it, which sometimes you can't, but it is what it is. Anyways, there's been a lot of things that have happened since we spoken last. The thing that comes to the top of my mind is the fact that I just bought John Wick 4 on home video, on demand or on Amazon Prime, and I've watched it. I've owned it for 3 days, and I've watched it 3 days now. And the thing with the John Wick movies is I love them. I really do. They're my favorite action franchise of all time. And it's the perfect background movie for me because there's enough music and action, so it's not silent, but it's also, well, at least the older movies weren't all action. John Wick 4 is pretty much all action, but I will probably, for the next 6 months, use John Wick 4 as my background movie, and that will be that. And I stand by that John Wick 4 is one of the greatest action movies that I've ever seen. I do think John Wick 1 is probably a little bit of a better movie altogether. I think my official John Wick movie franchise ranking goes John Wick 1, John Wick 4, John Wick 2, John Wick 3. And that's no hate on John Wick 3. I love that movie. I just think in the grand scheme of things, with all four movies lined up against each other, it's hard to beat the OG. It's such a fantastic movie. Just in terms of story and plot, it's phenomenal. John Wick 4 brings all the action that you could ever desire. I think John Wick 2 sneakily is my personal favorite. It's up there. I flip-flop between all the John Wicks all the time as what's my personal favorite movie. I do stick with 1, 4, 2, 3, but sometimes 2 sneaks its way up there. And on a rewatch of 2, let's say I rewatch it every 3 months or so, 6 months, fully, it catapults back up to number 1. It used to be my favorite. It used to go 2, 1, 3. But after rewatching all of the movies several times, 1, 4, 2, 3, I think is a fair ranking. And I love John Wick 3. Don't get me wrong. It's an amazing movie. I saw it in theaters. It's incredible. It just is a less action-y John Wick 4. And I think the action is better in John Wick 4. But anyways, John Wick 4 is now in my possession, and I own it, and I'm super happy about that because I love those movies. And I in terms of the movies that I've seen this year, which haven't been that many, I don't really know how many movies I've seen this year, but it stands out to me as my second favorite movie of the year so far, John Wick 4. My first favorite movie of the year, which I don't think I've even talked about on the podcast, was Guardians of the Galaxy 3. And I was so happy with that film because it brought back what the MCU is to me, what I think about when I think about the MCU. I cannot wait till it's on Disney Plus so I can watch it again. I cannot wait. I loved that movie. It was probably my favorite Guardians movie. If I had to pick one, I have to rewatch it, but I'm a big Guardians of the Galaxy 2 fan, and obviously the first movie, the OG, is fantastic. But 3 brought the action. It brought some iconic Guardians of the Galaxy, like silly, goofy scenes, like when Adam Warlock first comes in, and he's all handsome and gold and smoldering, flying through space without moving, or when he goes to touch. Oh, I won't give away the end. But 3 has everything, and it's. I think it's the funniest the funniest Guardians movie in a good way. It's not like Ant-Man where they try to make everything, or not even. It's not like Thor: Love and Thunder where they try to make everything a joke. I read a comment that Chris Hemsworth recently came out and said that Thor: Love and Thunder was probably a little too silly, looking back on it. And you can't blame the guy. And when you're in the process of making the movie, I'm sure your viewpoints are a little skewed because you're working on it all day. But to the outside viewer, man, that movie sucked. Yeah, that movie sucked. I saw another big thing that came out, which was the Rotten Tomatoes score for The Flash. And The Flash is one of my most anticipated movies of the year. I said that. There were reviews that came out that said it was the greatest superhero movie of all time. Now that's cap. That's straight capping right there. I think we can all agree that that's cap. But it gave me hope that this was going to be at least a put-together movie that made sense dramaturgically, which is a word. I promise. Google it. Dramaturgically. It was going to make sense story-wise. That's what I was hoping for. And The Flash currently, after 90 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes, which I trust to a point. I take it with a grain of salt, especially the critic reviews. It has a 71% on Rotten Tomatoes, which to me is a little alarming. If people are saying that this is the greatest DC film of all time, it's starting to feel like this might be a like a Spider-Man No Way Home type of scenario. Where Spider-Man No Way Home was a great movie. Don't get me wrong. I've watched it once since I saw it in theaters. It was an awesome theater experience. But it's in terms of story and in terms of everything that you look for in a movie and rewatchability, there's not a whole lot there. It's definitely a good movie, don't get me wrong. But I feel like The Flash is going to play a lot like Spider-Man No Way Home. I think there's going to be a lot of cameos, a lot of cool scenes, maybe old superheroes coming back for a little bit of screen time. Because essentially this is going to restart the DC EU for James Gunn to come in and do his thing. The first critic consensus here. I don't think there's any spoilers here. While it plays too much like a sizzle reel of DC's greatest hits to fully stand on its own 2 feet, The Flash has enough heart and zip to maintain a confident stride. So that's kind of like where I thought this would land. It'd be a good movie. It wouldn't be the greatest superhero movie of all time, but it would be good. And the 71% on Rotten Tomatoes tells me that for everything it tells me that I'm justified in what I was worried about in this movie, but it also tells me I can go in with a sense of confidence as well, and I don't have to be too paranoid that this is just going to be a cameo fest and it's not going to make any sense. Also, at least in the last trailer that I saw for The Flash, the CGI looked not good in a lot of different spots. So we'll see. I will see it the day it comes out, which I believe is when does this movie come out? June 16th, which is next week. So, but I'm looking forward to, I'm really looking forward to The Flash, and there's a lot of good movies coming out that I really want to see. I don't even know what other movies are coming out. I know Oppenheimer is coming out very soon, which is another one of my most anticipated films of the year. The trailer for Killers of the Flower Moon, starring Leo and Robert De Niro, that trailer came out, and that looked like a stereotypical Martin Scorsese movie. Sign me up, please. I want to watch it. But yeah, man, that was like the biggest thing that was on my mind in terms of movies was The Flash, because I do really want to see it. I just don't know if it was almost being hyped up too much, and that was what I was getting worried about. In terms of what else is going on, MMA hasn't really been a whole lot happening. I haven't been watching The Ultimate Fighter. I watched the first episode on YouTube a few days later, and I'll probably keep up with it. But I liked the first episode of The Ultimate Fighter with McGregor and Chandler. And I think the second episode is out already, so I'll probably watch that. But other than that, hasn't really been a whole lot going on in terms of notability within the UFC sphere. I mean, we have a pay-per-view on this weekend. Charlie Olives is fighting Beneil Dariush, which would be a great fight. I really wish I could watch that fight, but I'm not paying $80 for an Amanda Nunes main event. I can't justify it. So I will be hopefully finding a live stream on TikTok or something for the Charlie Olives fight. My pick is probably Dariush is gonna beat Charlie Olives. But I do really like Charles Olivera. Don't get me wrong. Charles. His knockout against Michael Chandler is such a good knockout. He had a fantastic run. When he was champion for the few fights that he was, it was a fun time. And I really would like to see a rematch between him and Islam, if at all possible. I think if Charlie Olives wins this fight, probably this is for a title shot, if I had to guess. Since now we have Poirier versus Gaethje confirmed for the BMF title. This is probably going to be for a number one contendership. But I think I'm taking Dariush. Dariush is not as good on the ground in terms of his jiu-jitsu as Charlie Olives, but he's very tenacious and seems to push the pace, just like Charlie Olives does, but Dariush has something to prove. He hasn't been there yet. Charlie Olives has been there, so he understands the weight of the situation. But we'll see. This is why, because I don't know. I don't know who's going to win this fight, and I would really like to watch it, but I can't justify paying it. When the main event is Amanda Nunes versus Irene Aldana, who's 14-6. Like the third fight on the card is Mike Malott versus Adam Forget. Adam, forget about it. Dan 50K Ige is on there, or Ige. Yeah, this card sucks. And I listen, all respect to the fighters on the card, don't get me wrong, but this fight sucks. This fight card sucks. Really, really poor fight card. I mean, we have some really lackluster cards coming up that just suck. The thing of note that's coming up next will be probably International Fight Week. Volkanovski versus Yair Rodriguez, which I don't know why Yair is going in with an interim title, but that will be a fire fight. Moreno versus Pantoja, Alexandre Pantoja. Might have pronounced that wrong. That'll be a fire fight because it's Brandon Moreno. Robert Whitaker versus Dricus Duplessis. Fire fight. Bo Nickel coming back. Jalen Turner versus Dan Hooker is a fire fight. So that will be a pretty good card. But again, like to justify paying $80, you're paying for Volkanovski versus Rodriguez, and you're paying to see Brandon Moreno, and you're paying to see Robert Whitaker. Is that worth $80? To me, it is, because I'm a degenerate when it comes to human cockfighting. But that's just me. And then after that, yeah, terrible cards. Ugh. Gets to UFC 291 in late July, which is Poirier versus Gaethje, and Jan Blachowicz versus Alex Pereira, and Tony Ferguson versus Bobby Green, and Paulo Costa coming back, and Stephen Thompson coming back, and Derek Lewis coming back, and Michael Chiesa versus Kevin Holland. That's a fire fucking card right there. UFC 291 will be the next big fight card. And then, of course, coming up in Boston, UFC 292, Aljamain Sterling versus Sean O'Malley, which I am going to do everything in my power to be back there. Oh, and they put Chris Weidman on the card. Chris Weidman versus Brad Tavares. So Chris Weidman is making his return fight in Boston. That is interesting. I really want to go to that fight. Tickets will be expensive, but that's okay. All right, let's pour some of this whiskey here. We'll talk about Starlight as we pour it. Solid cork pop. Real cork. Always respect that. All right. Let that sit for a second. So, again, let's review some whiskey because we haven't done it in almost 2 months. Starlight Distillers, Carl T. Huber, single barrel bourbon whiskey finished in honey barrels. This is selected by the Barrel Hunters, which I believe is a Rhode Island group here in Rhode Island. This specific batch or barrel number is 22-2508-1. This is specifically 112.5 proof, and it's aged for 4 years. Starlight Distillers is based out in Indiana. And when I think of like single barrels and single barrel programs and single barrel picks and funky finishes, there are a few distilleries which are kind of making a name for that now. And I think the one of the first distilleries that brought it to the forefront in the whiskey space was Starlight, and I respect them for that. I've never had an interest in trying their whiskey or buying one of their bottles, and I'm hoping that this. I don't know if I'm gonna enjoy this honey barrel finish as much as I want to, but I hope that it's interesting enough where I will at least look at Starlight and not just. I don't want to say I look at Starlight and think gimmick, because I know it's a super popular and super successful brand, and I'm looking on their website right now, which is a beautiful website, and the pictures that they have this looks gorgeous. But I always just in the back of my mind thought gimmick because of their finishes and their single barrels and all that stuff. But you know, they were at the forefront, and they did help and innovate that single barrel experience for a lot of people. And it kind of turned into a new fad of not only single barrel picks being within craft distilleries that are helping craft distilleries elevate their name by offering these really, really quality single barrel picks, but also funky finishes translating into a single barrel pick. So being able to pick a single barrel that's finished in a port wine cask or a sherry cask or a rum cask or a cigar finish or a toasted, something that's finished, and having that be a single barrel. I don't know if that's been the case for a long time, but I know that when I think of that tunnel of whiskey, of that subset of whiskey, those funky finished single barrel programs, Starlight is one of the first ones I think of, and I have my respect for that. So Starlight, I want to see exactly where they're from. Oh, there's their address. Borden, Indiana. Family owned and farmed since 1843. Distilled, aged, and bottled by Starlight Distillery. Gotta respect that. Carl T is our signature bourbon, named after fourth-generation family member Carl Theodore Huber. After a minimum of 4 years of aging in new charred American oak barrels, this bourbon is then finished in ex-bourbon barrels aged with fresh honey from the farm. The sweet floral notes of the honey complement the characteristic flavors of our flagship bourbon. So essentially, they're taking their flagship bourbon and they're finishing it in ex-bourbon barrels aged with fresh honey from their farm. This is a grain-to-glass operation at Starlight, similar to a lot of craft distilleries now that are getting to the age where they can release their own distillate, and it has an age statement. Sagamore is just like that. Bardstown with their Origin series is becoming grain to glass as well. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with sourcing. Don't get me wrong, but there is a special characteristic to a grain to glass operation. So a little bit about Starlight, and again, I don't know this as much. I'm kind of just gonna you're gonna read the website with me for a second. What I do know, and what my buddy Ron over at Wyoming Package told me, is that Starlight is ran by these two younger kids, and I think they're brothers, kind of like similar in age difference to me and Kale. Me and Kale are 17 months apart. And I thought that was really cool. I don't know exactly. I can't really see like who they are here, just by their website. But there's a bunch of pictures of them on the website, and yeah, I think they got two, probably part of the family, just two young bucks running the game over there, or at least helping, which is great. I love young people in whiskey because I'm a young guy in whiskey, and I think that there's a stigma that still is around that whiskey is kind of like the new wine for married women. Whiskey is like a married guy, has kids, and has his whiskey as his kind of like this is my thing now. I'm a whiskey guy because I'm married with kids. I can't go out and do all this stuff. I think there's a little bit of a stigma there right now in the whiskey game for that, and I hope that the fact that I am nowhere near being married or having kids shows that you can be single and not have any responsibility and still love whiskey. In 2000, the Huber family purchased an 80-gallon pot still from the renowned German company Christian Karl, and by November 2004, the first bottle of Huber brandy was on the shelves of their retail space. From 2001 to 2013, Starlight Distillery primarily produced brandies and ports, while eyeing the opportunity to work with Indiana legislators to gain a new permit allowing them to produce artisan spirits from grains, whiskey. I do know that the area that this distillery settles in was at one point considered the capital of brandy in the United States. It was kind of like the central hub of where brandy was made, so it doesn't surprise me that Starlight started their operations with brandy. Finally, in 2013, the family achieved their goal, and Starlight Distillery became one of the first artisan distilleries in the state producing bourbon. That's impressive. The expansion involved implementing a new 13,000 square foot still house adjacent to the original production area. It was in this warehouse that Carl T. Bourbon was born, named after the Huber family's patriarch and a lover of the spirit himself. Carl T. and his spouse, Marcella, are the reasons that the family legacy continues into the 7th generation of ownership in distilling, which I'm assuming are the 2 young kids. Today, in addition to bourbon, Starlight Distillery produces rye, vodka, gin, and blackberry whiskey. Their signature red brick houses located adjacent to the distillery production area are a testament to their commitment to the craft. Starlight Distillery distributes its bourbon and spirits to 18 states and Alberta, Canada, and their family legacy rooted in distillation continues to grow stronger. Yep. So, yeah, cool stuff here. It seems like a homegrown, family-operated grain-to-glass process. Again, their pictures on their website look awesome. This is definitely somewhere I would love to visit. Lots of green, lots of open space, big red brick houses, which I think look really cool. They have their vineyards, orchards on site. They have a cafe, corn maze, catch a farm tour on the grain train, what they called me in high school. Race pedal carts around our 1,000-foot track, swish down the mountainside. So this seems like an experience, and I really, again, I'm kind of just learning about this for the first time right now, but it seems like it's a cool concept here. And then it says View Awards. I want to see what they've won. Starlight Distillery is Indiana's most award-winning farm-to-bottle distillery. Important to note, farm-to-bottle. See, because they're not beating MGB. See firsthand from the nation's top competitions how Starlight Distillery ranks against the top award-winning distilleries. San Francisco, World Spirits. Gold, Carl T. Single Barrel Bourbon Whiskey. Okay, so some of their finished whiskeys won silver. Their gin won silver. Carl T. Bourbon Whiskey won bronze. Double gold, Carl T. Single Barrel Bourbon Whiskey in 2022. Ascot Awards, which, by the way, I'm sure you guys, if you follow me, you've seen this news. We had a full episode about it on Bourbon with Friends. Paul and I recently won a gold medal for our single barrel pick from Bradshaw Bourbon last year. We won gold at the Ascot Awards, which was, I think, a really big deal. I can technically say that a whiskey that I was directly involved in won a gold medal, which is super cool. 2022, Starlight won the Craft Distiller of the Year at the Ascot Awards. They won Best Craft Bourbon at the Ascot Awards. They won Best Apple Brandy. They won Gold in Craft Bourbon, Carl T. Bottled and Bond. They won Gold in Special Barrel Finish for their Single Barrel Rum Finish Bourbon. And they won Gold in Craft Bourbon for their Carl T. Bourbon Whiskey. They won Platinum, Best in Category. Yeah, there's a lot here. So basically, they have a lot going for them, and one of the offerings that they have is this single barrel finished in honey barrels at 112.5 proof. So I'm not entirely too sure how this is going to be. It's aged at least 4 years. Again, 112.5 proof. I don't know what the mash bill is. I don't think it's disclosed as of right now what their mash bill is. It's got to be at least 51% corn because it is a bourbon whiskey. And again, they say at least 4 years, so we're going with the whiskeys in this. But the whiskey from this single barrel was aged for at least 4 years in the original container. But I want to get into it. I'm excited. Honey. I'm a honey guy. Like, I enjoy honey in my tea. I enjoy honey, like on certain foods. I enjoy honey as like a dessert. Like if you put honey on like vanilla ice cream or something, I think it tastes good. I love baklava, which is a very what is it, Greek? I think it's a Greek dessert, and there's honey in there, and I always think of like baklava when I think of honey. If I ever drink my sleepy time tea, which I probably will tonight, to be honest, I'll put honey in there. So My first initial thought is that this would probably be really good in a hot toddy because of the honey, but we'll see. So let's give it an old sniffy poo here, and see what we're working with. Okay, so it's very florally on the nose to begin. Very bright. Very like bright fruit almost. All right. Now that I have some, okay, now I can really smell the honey. Okay, now the honey's really coming off. But it's not like it's like a natural honey. It's not. Okay. Oh, wow. All right, it took my nose. It took the old sniffer to warm up for a few minutes or for a few sniffs. But now that honey is coming through very, very strong. Like a honey stick. Like I used to work at a place, and they would always have honey sticks, and I'd kind of just take them and eat them, crack them open and eat them. This smells like a honey stick. But there's also other sweeteners. There's vanilla in there. Again, there's a nice floralness, like a perfume flower type of, like a fresh flower from the garden. The oak is represented a hair, but what comes through is the proof. You can tell that this is a bit higher proof. It is a little prickly, a little sharp. But yeah, after a few sniffs, man, the honey came through exponentially on this, and I am not mad at it. It is definitely very unique. Once you smell the honey, you can't not smell the honey, which I enjoy. Yeah, the honey's definitely there. Straight up honey stick, bruv. Honey stick galore. And this is already kind of like, okay, I was right. This is gonna, maybe I'll put this in my tea tonight if I have it. All right, well, let's take a sip. Haven't had whiskey yet today, so cheers to everybody to another week of Who Gives a Dram. Oops. Not the best, but cheers. Shanta. Lots of honey. Lots of honey. Honey and oak. It's a little darker on the palate. Really coats the mouth nice. Hot going down. Again, this is my first sip of whiskey of the day, but definitely hot going down like it's 112 and a half proof. So, yeah, no, pretty good. Pretty good. Pretty good. Let's take another sip. Oh, that honey is there. That honey is there. This is 100% a honey finished bourbon. Don't get me wrong. There is a nice spiciness to the palate. I think it is slightly more barrel influence. It's drying out my mouth a little bit. And I can tell that because I'm salivating more. I think this hit me different than I thought it was going to hit me. Yeah. It's got a lot of more barrel influence to this, a little bit of like a dry spice, but there's also that rye there as well, and that cinnamon. I would be willing to bet this is a higher rye bourbon mash bill. I don't know that for a fact, but I'd be willing to bet, based on the spice that I'm getting, the little bit of prickliness that I got on the nose, plus the spice that I'm getting from the palate, yeah, this is 100% a high rye whiskey. I'd be willing to put money on that. but the honey influence here is phenomenal, and I mean that in the best way possible. This is a just based on, jeez, keep burping. Just based on 2 sips, there's a really nice balance of honey, which has to be, if you're finishing a honey barrel, it has to be the main tasting note, but also that subtle sweetness of like a vanilla, but then that barrel influence that is there to me 100%, plus that rye spice, that cinnamon spice. It's very balanced, it's very nuanced. There's very particular tasting notes that I get. You can definitely pick out the honey, but you can pick out the different tasting notes. There's not a whole lot of things going on, but the things that are happening are very noticeable and they're very quality. Like, I wouldn't say this is a very busy whiskey. I wouldn't say there's, what's the brand that says there's 200 plus tasting notes or some bullshit? Is it Woodford? Which is the dumbest thing. What whiskey has 200 tasting notes? Woodford, yeah. There are more than 200 detectable flavors in Woodford Reserve. 212 to be exact. What a piece of shit. I like Woodford. And Woodford's whiskey is good. I love the double oaked. The Woodford double oaked is one of my favorite finished bourbons out there. But to say that you have 212 tasting notes to be exact is so pompous and so like just so like the person who sat down, I guarantee there's one thing on this planet that I guarantee, other than the fact that John Wick could beat Jason Bourne in a hand-to-hand fight. That I'm certain of. And I've gotten into arguments with people over that. Another thing that I am certain of in this life is the guy who sat down and picked out 212 tasting notes on a bottle of Woodford Reserve definitely at some point in his life has worn a monocle. I can guarantee it. But yeah, this honey whiskey's pretty good. Honey whiskey's pretty good. I enjoy the uniqueness of it. You know, like I just enjoy whiskeys that are different. I enjoy whiskeys that are different for a purpose. I don't enjoy whiskeys that are different just to be different. Like, for example, Jefferson's Ocean. It's a cool concept to be aged at sea, but you just put a huge price tag on nothing, in my humble opinion. But these, especially in the craft game, where they're experimenting with these different finishes in different barrels, honey, you see a lot of like red wine casks being used. Not necessarily sweet wine, but like, for example, High West came out with the Prisoner's Share blend, which I would love to get my hands on, or at least have a sip of it. If it's anything like Midwinter Nights, it's gonna turn into one of my favorite ryes. But there's so many different barrel finishes happening now, and there's so many that are just quality and good, and this is one of them. I commend barrel hunters for picking out a good barrel. I mean, this is definitely quality, and I commend Starlight for using, I'm assuming they have bees on site and they're taking fresh honey from the bees and using it to make this honey barrel finished bourbon. But man, this is definitely a quality finished bourbon, just in general. The honey, I am a fan of. if you're not a fan of sweeter bourbons, you probably won't like not just this in particular, but honey finishes in general, because honey is just naturally sweet. So you probably won't like this if you're a rye whiskey fan and you like that dryness, that earthiness that a rye whiskey brings to the table. But if you're a fan of something like a Buffalo Trace or a Weller, a wheated bourbon, Redemption wheated, Larceny, something that has a bit of a sweetness to it, I think you'll really like what Starlight's doing with their honey finishes. And I thought I heard that they're going to put a honey finished bourbon into their core lineup. I could be wrong. Please do not quote me on that, but I thought I heard that from somebody. And if they did, I would assume it's not going to be this high proof. I'm assuming it'll be like mid to high 90s if I had to guess. I don't think this would be as quality if it was lower in proof. I think the high proof, the barrel influence here, really, really helps in terms of allowing the honey to really come forward, I think. I think if it was lower in age, I think it would just, you need that barrel spice to complement the sweetness of the honey. It's like, for me, having a like pairing a cigar and a whiskey. You don't want them to you want them to be a little different, in my opinion. For example, I really like having a medium to maybe a little bit darker cigar with a medium to maybe a little lighter whiskey, like a Buffalo Trace. Or I like to have a mild cigar, like a Monte Cristo, and I'll drink that with like a rare breed, a higher proofed whiskey. Just, I like how it complements each other. That's what the barrels and the high proof does with this honey finished bourbon. So if we're going to give it a score, let me take one more sip. This is great for the summertime, man. And this would be fantastic in a cocktail. Giving it the swishy poo in the mouth, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Really good. I would say this is high up there. This is one of the better finished whiskeys that I've had. Again, I've never had honey finished bourbon before. This is my first time. I'd say this is like an 8.7, around that area. Like this is close to like being really like top tier good. The reason it's not is just simply because although I really like the honey, I don't prefer it over other finishes. I think the honey, they do honey finished bourbon in this specific. Starlight does honey finished bourbon probably about as good as you can do it. I just don't prefer honey normally. I'd rather have like a Pedro Jimenez sherry cask finish or a like a solid rum finish. I think is a little bit tastier in general. But for honey finished bourbon, I think Starlight's there. I think this is the pinnacle. I think you're putting Starlight at the top. And this definitely makes me want to go out and try new Starlight now and have a bottle and try to get them on the podcast and talk whiskey with them. That's what this is all about. So I would say 8.7 for Starlight single barrel bourbon whiskey finished in honey barrels. Again, thank you to Ron for selling this to me. Got a good price. Thank you for picking it. Barrel Hunters, great job for picking a good single barrel. But that's going to do it for me this week, you guys. Hope you enjoyed this review. I hope you guys go out and check Starlight out now. And if you can get your hands on a single barrel around you that's finished in honey, I would 100% recommend it. And that's that. So make sure you're following along Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok at Who Gives a Dram. Make sure you're following. There's going to be a lot of cool things coming up. If you haven't gotten your tickets yet to the Bourbon Ball, it's on June 30th and July 1st. Get your tickets, www.bourbonballky.com. You can direct message us on Instagram at BWF Podcast if you'd like, or you can direct message me, Who Gives a Dram. But you can directly buy tickets by going to www.bourbonballky.com. But other than that, yeah, this is great. Make sure you're leaving a 5-star rating on iTunes. Make sure you're subscribed wherever you're listening, and we'll keep doing this. So lots of moving parts right now. Things are very liquid, but it is a good situation that I'm in, and I can't wait to explain in more detail about what I'm doing behind the scenes and part of the reason why I haven't been as consistent on the podcast. So I'll be back very soon, probably next week, for more content, more whiskey content. I mean, no, not next week will be the Flash, but 2 weeks. I'll be in Kentucky for a few weeks in late June to early July. I'll be in Kentucky for about 2 weeks. Again, lots of things happening, but I'm very, very happy, very blessed. So until next time, always remember, whiskey's the water of life, so let's start living.